On this episode of Couch Conversations,
parenting carries another dynamic of you parent the way you were parented unless you make a decision that you're going to change things.
welcome to Couch Conversations, a podcast for women who want to chat about real life issues. Hi, I'm Courtney B. Riley. We're talking about what it means to be a woman of God today, how to find purpose in life, and how to deal with tough conversations. So grab a cup of coffee and join us on the couch for some good conversation. Hi, and welcome to the Women of Influence podcast. I'm Courtney Riley, and I'm excited to have two guests. This is our first time with two guests on a podcast episode. So Catherine Burton is the family life pastor at the best church in the world, also known as Lighthouse. I'm biased because it's my church home. So glad you're here. Thanks for being here, Pastor Catherine. And her daughter is here, who I just met in the last couple of years, but also a dynamic woman, Bethany Dillon. And Bethany is mom to two littles and a yoga instructor and massage therapist. And today we are talking about the mother-daughter duet, encouragement for mothers and daughters. So as always, the episodes are here to encourage listeners to just know that they're not the only ones navigating tough stuff that is life. And so we hope anyone listening is just encouraged by what they share today. And we're going to get some golden nuggets, hopefully, from them. The secret recipe for perfect mother-daughter relationship, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So if you're listening and you're waiting for like the 3 steps success secret or the pill you can take, tune out now. No, stay listening because it's a process. And I'm sure you guys can attest, we never fully get it right? But we should learn from the wisdom and experience of each other. And so I'm excited to have you guys. Thanks for being here together. This will be cool.
Yeah.
Well,
thanks for having us. This is fun.
Yeah. I thought the duet was appropriate. We just laughed about that a minute ago because it's kind of like a dance, I'm sure, being mother and daughter relationship, stepping on toes and, someone taking lead. And then as you navigate different seasons of life, as your children grow, your role changes. So you're navigating that. So I'm especially excited about today's episode because I would say the new mom of a daughter, but she's 4. I feel like new mom still, feel like it just happened. But everyone has always said raising girls are the hardest or most challenging as they get older. So let me start by saying, is that true? Would you agree? Why do you think they say that if it's not necessarily true?
Even as the daughter, I'd say, like as a daughter, I would say it's difficult. And as a mother, I would say it's difficult.
Yeah.
I think they say that because in a lot of ways, you're facing yourself as your daughter grows. To see her as a little one, it's a little, it's not as challenging because you're still shaping that. But then when they get into like the middle school, teenage years, you lose control of that. So then you begin to see some things that come back and that can be challenging because it does make you have to look back at yourself and to own some things that maybe you hadn't seen before. And then, so, and they have to be themselves. They have to create some space. So it can be that part can be a little toe stepping for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I have my daughter, but I have a son that's almost 19 and I feel like it's across the board because he's obviously a boy. And it's that when your role changes, when you go from controlling and molding to kind of A, giving them space to fall face forward when they need to, but B, letting them kind of find who they are, who they're called to be, separate from being your daughter. That's got to be hard because, it's scary. And then, like you said, if you see yourself in them, that maybe it causes people to start going, oh gosh, I don't like that part of me, or I can see that thing of myself.
Right. And I think sometimes as Christian parents, we've put this pressure on ourselves that our child is a reflection of our faith, or our their outward behaviors, or the way that they handle themselves is a reflection of our Christian upbringing of them. And so, you have to let go of that. You have to get to the place where, not only are they making their own decisions, but, that's not reflective of what I necessarily wanted for them to choose. And you have to make that separation for sure.
Mm. Yeah. Do you guys, so you guys are close now. I mean, I know a lot of moms and daughters. I feel like you guys are one of the closest. You like each other.
Yeah, I don't leave. Moved 3-4 states away, and I feel like I call her like every day. But it definitely was not always like that.
That's what I was going to ask next. Was it always like this?
No. I was very much so, your typical like young teenage, girl, where we hit a spot where I was like, I can't stand my mom. And it felt like we just nothing, our styles were different. Our the way that we, interacted with other people was different. And even as a young teenager, I still kind of felt like I had the same brain that I do now. Like everything always felt very logical, but there was obviously still that I just can't stand my mom. But it was coming from a place of, I just don't know how this person is thinking. And what it really came down to was hitting a moment of, okay, but we need to get on the same page. I think we both kind of realized it at the same time of like, we got to cut it out because we got to make this work. This person is more important to me than me being right. At least that's how it was.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think, we went through a time in our family where we had all of the slings and arrows of the enemy hitting us and trying to split our family apart. And it came, for Bethany at a really critical time. She was like 15, 16. My marriage was impacted. Her brothers were leaving and moving out. And so, it just became this sense of everything is flying in different directions. And, for me, I just came to a realization that I'm not going to lose my daughter over this. I'm not going to be different, to let this change me so much that it changed, our dynamic. And I just, made a decision to get to know her, to get to understand. You go through I think at the beginning, you go through you're not wearing those shoes, or you're not wearing that dress, all of that thing with your girl, because you value that outward appearance for them. And as women, how important that is. It just is, whether we like it or not. We are so immediately pigeonholed by our appearance. And so
even safety. Yeah. I mean, you think about in this world, everything.
And so, you go from that. And so we were at that point where we were transitioning out of I've told you how to act. I've told you how to dress. I've told you how to be. And, our family just exploded. And it became for me just an eye-opening thing of saying, okay, some of this rebellion that I think is really just who she is. And while I want my daughter to be 100% like me and to love all the things that I love and do all the things that I do, she doesn't. So let me find out, what are the things that she does love? What are the things that motivate her?
And even still, the kind of the realization of, even if we did appreciate the same things, it might be in different forms.
Right.
Like we both very much so love fashion and looking nice, but in a different sort of way. Like I will look at something and think, oh, wow, now that is like a really slick outfitter. We found that we both really like to watch Project Runway. And we would talk about like, oh, I really appreciate, what the designer did here. And mom would be like, oh, I know exactly where I'd wear that. I'm like, oh gosh, I would never wear that anywhere, but I can appreciate this, the design of it. I can appreciate that. And because, we'd go shopping and she'd be like, don't you love this? I'm like, oh yeah, it's really cute. I would never wear that. And so realizing we both really appreciate fashion and design, but in very different ways.
Oh yeah, we don't shop together well at all.
No.
We would watch that show, but we do not shop. Because I'm like every little thing. I'm like, oh, isn't this cute? Look at this. You could do this. And she's like, I'm just here to get what I need.
Yeah, I already know. Like I need 2 shirts, 1 pair of dark wash skinny jeans, and that's all that I'm going to look at. I'm not even going to bat an eye at anything else.
Yeah. And I want her to try on 45 different variations of all of those things. So yeah. So same and not same.
Yeah. So just realizing on, a multitude of levels that there are things that we are polar opposites on, but I'd say more so we are very similar, but in different ways. Then there are things totally different about us. And 2, realizing just kind of figuring out and trusting each other. Because I remember being a young girl and, things would pop up and I would hear like, you need to not do that or make sure you aren't doing that. And me thinking like, don't you know me at all? Like, I was always this like goody two shoe girl. I never liked to break the rules. And I guess maybe because I came after 2 brothers, that might have impacted things that my mom would be like, you need to do this. And I'd be like, Roger Dodger. But I didn't feel like she trusted me in that because the warning would just keep coming. But that's also now the spirit of being a mother of, you're a mother. And so you really just want to make sure that, that your baby is safe and that, they know the rules. But as a young, as a teenager, and I would just be like, that I'm not going to break the rules. That I'm not going to do anything stupid. Even if I was hanging around with maybe the worst company, I was always probably the first one to be like, hey guys, I'm out. I'm not doing that. Which, like I said, could have been just her being a mom and just trying to really make sure that I was safe, or also coming after 2 brothers.
Yeah. I'm the oldest of 4, and I was the wrecking ball that made it harder for my younger sister, who was like she was salutatorian of high school and college and, very, very good girl. The worst thing she'd do is hide in her closet with Harry Potter books, that she wasn't supposed to read yet or something. But so what was cool though, in hearing all that you've shared so far, I saw the common thread was that the importance of allowing and making space for your children to be individuals and then respecting that, because, like you were saying a few minutes ago, just then, like you were saying, you may have other children. So people listening, you might have other children that have done one thing and being careful and being intentional about not assuming that the other children will follow suit, but also where you have differences, like you guys are different, making space once you guys, it sounds like things got better and healthier. Once you both said, look, we are different. We're not going to be the same. That's okay. Right. And kind of made space to be that.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of it too was, understanding that we're different and finding empathy and saying you're different, but you're worth understanding. Versus just like I'm nothing like my mom. We don't talk, we don't do anything together because we're nothing alike. It was realizing you are different and I need to kind of chisel out the beauty of that and find, what is worth recognizing, what is worth as a daughter, carrying forward. And and that sort of thing, looking at, I don't know.
I think that, the thing is, we all, whether we know it or not, we all have a narrative, and you have to let that narrative be informed by a real fundamental truth. And so, for me, it was that crucial moment of, how am I going to love my daughter? What am I going to, because I think we can say that we love somebody because we buy them things, or we're available, or we give advice or wisdom. But, to truly love somebody, you have to understand, what do they need? What do they need in order to feel loved? And so when you let that narrative become how you approach conflict or, challenges like, getting married, moving away, and you let that narrative be, because, like, to take that for example, for her, I always dreamed that I would be there to be able to help my daughter with her children when they were young, because I didn't have that in my life. So I wanted to be that for her. It was important to me. But then Penelope was 18 months?
18 months.
And she was pregnant with Theo, and they got orders to leave and move to Savannah. So, I could have chosen to say, oh, poor me, and just, really made her feel terrible and guilty, and just focused on how terrible and sad it was. And we didn't get to experience that time the way that I wanted to. Or I could choose to support her decision to, this is what her family was doing. This is where God was leading her family. And this is what was a part of their life. And just try to be that encouragement, not to be false. It wasn't like she knew. I mean, I bawled like a baby when I, left them when they first moved down, not hiding things, but, to just try to let that narrative be, how can I love you the best way of, that you need it right now.
Yeah. And helping kind of carry the weight of that, because anyone with littles knows how hard it is and can be when you have no help. Which, being a military spouse, that meant moving to a place where we knew no one. And I am terribly picky about who I let watch my children. And so my mom and my best friend were pretty much the only people who had ever babysat Penelope. And here we are somewhere where I don't know anyone. So it was really difficult to know that I was pretty much not going to be away from my daughter, other than maybe church childcare, for the next 2 years. And it would have been much harder if I also had to bear the weight of my mom's grief. And so her understanding, like me, sharing the fact that this is really hard, but then knowing when it was a safe space to vent about that, and that we could be sad together, and her knowing when she needed to,
smile for you.
Smile for me, or just sit on the phone and us not talk for like the whole time I'm driving around town, just to feel a little bit closer, to full circle to when Theo was 2 weeks old. He was the first in the family to get a virus, which at 2 weeks old, he spiked a temperature of 103. And if his sister had been sick the week before, we might have had some warning and felt a little more comfortable, but it was pretty scary. And so we ended up in the emergency room and then admitted to the children's hospital for 2 days. And that was really hard. And my mom dropped everything and drove, even though she had just been here 2 weeks prior for when he was born. So she dropped everything, drove back down. So knowing when and how to support was huge in that scenario. But we wouldn't have been able to do that if we hadn't have put in the hard work, 10
of getting to know each other.
Yeah. Of figuring out how
to love each other.
Because I remember telling her several years ago, something that I personally do when someone is coming to me and venting or whatnot is I'll stop them and I'll say, okay, do you want me to just listen and keep my mouth shut? Do you want advice or do you want empathy? Because sometimes, especially as women, like sometimes we want answers and we're saying, hey, I need help to figure this out. Sometimes we just want to complain and we just need someone to hear us talk about how much our day sucked.
Have a pity party.
And agree with us. And sometimes we just need someone to be completely silent and just, sit there and nod. And that was kind of groundbreaking for us.
That was huge.
She's a huge advice giver. And I was like, I don't want you to help me. I just need to talk about this because too, I'm a verbal processor. And so I will talk until I give myself the answer that I need. And
I'm totally not that person.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to ask 100 questions and, I want to help you and figure and give you your solutions.
Yeah. And I would just say, please be quiet. I need to figure this out for myself. But then there are some times where I call her and,
tell me what to do.
Yeah. How do I do this? Or just yesterday, my daughter had an accident or potty training and I called my mom to the bathroom and I was like, I don't even know how to handle this. What do I do?
Underwear. How do you do that when it's all over the floor and it's everywhere?
So, there's a time and place for advice and there's a time and place for
poop.
Yeah.
And poop happens. No, I think that's good. So really, some of the nuggets there are give your growing children, space to be themselves and learn, mothers and daughters, give space for individuality and then spend time learning who each other are and how they receive love and what they need. Because it sounds like, Catherine, you were very sensitive to how Bethany needed love in different situations and loved her in different ways, dropping everything and showing up or just sitting quietly. And then Bethany, you also helped her by things like, hey, these 3 things, when you ask, this is what I need. So it's like, instead of just assuming, which is really the issue probably in a lot of relational offenses, right? Instead of assuming, make space to actually hear from them and then help them. I mean, I think we're taught to love everyone, but we're not taught to help people love us. Humans are hard, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, parenting carries another dynamic of you parent the way you were parented, unless you make a decision that you're going to change things.
Yeah.
And for me, I did not grow up in a Christian home, but I became a Christian before I had kids. So it was very much an intentional thing for me to say, how do I do this differently? How do I do this in that it honors God? And so a lot of that ended up coming back and being, how do I face the hurt that I had as a daughter? How do I understand and process the needs I had for my mom that she did not meet and could not and wasn't able to? You have to, because I remember before, I had 2 boys first. And, in that space of thinking about having a daughter, I was terrified of having a daughter because I had such a broken relationship and I was so, I did not think I had the ability to be a mom of a daughter and to be able to help her to be healthy and whole and loved and supported. And so, it took a lot of me having to go back and say, what are the things that I responded to my mother in a really unhealthy way. And it created this in me that I have got to change. It just has to happen. Making her be responsible for my feelings that had to change. That completely had to change. Her, the way that she would, whether it was grades she got or accomplishments or how other people perceived her, that couldn't be that had to be done for her on her own terms, not so that it made me happy. And I did not, I didn't catch up to that right away. When she was younger, there was a whole lot of, you have to dress this way for church, or you have to have, everything has to be perfect before we go anywhere.
Yeah.
Because it was a reflection of me. And so I had to come to the place where I was like, you know what? It's okay for them to not be perfect. And then I was able to say, it's okay for me to not be perfect.
Yeah. So good. So good.
And I think too, going into like our teenage years, and I remember this, especially my mom homeschooled me and my brothers. And so, especially in like the late 90s, early 2000s, there's this whole, stigma around homeschoolers and how they dressed and how they acted. And that was very much so not our experience. We did things, we did things like take piano lessons, but my brother also had like a hardcore metal band. And I remember, I don't know if I'm remembering her saying it to us or to another mom. I remember you saying that you didn't care so much about our appearance and how we dressed as long as you knew where our heart was. And so me and my brothers, we always had dyed hair. I wore knee-high Converse and, all the pop punk clothes. And, but it was because she knew where our heart was towards the Lord and our involvement in church. And she knew where she could allow, how much freedom she could allow us, because she knew our heart. She knew that we weren't gonna, also be doing other undesirable activities.
Yeah.
And I think that that's huge, especially I take that into, now mothering, of knowing, my kid, kind of creating that boundary of allowing freedom while also shaping the character and the morals.
Yeah.
And, allowing expression while also still shepherding and discipling your children towards Christ.
I love that. Allowing expression, but being clear on the non-negotiables, or like the core things, right? Like, these are the things, and not to pull it over to business, but like in the business world, and I was actually talking to Pastor Dan about this morning, it's like the culture or the values determine the culture, right? And so if you can choose, what are your 3 values, right? Not like 20 of them, but what are the things that you're like, no matter what, these are the 3 things that we are sticking to, right? It allows you to run everything else up against that and say, does it fit in that? Or is it what he said he calls a misfit, right? And if it's a misfit, we lay it down, whether for the season or forever. But I think that's kind of in the parenting, what it sounds like you guys are able to do, is say, these are the things that they're non-negotiables. These are the things that really matter. Your heart position, your walk with the Lord, and then probably honoring your family. There were some concrete non-negotiables. And then you guys, instead of making everything important enough to die on, right? You chose those 3, and then you let there be space for freedom for the other things. So what they dress like, or what music they were involved in, or, that's how wise is that? Because I think we try to have all the things, hills we die on. And then it's like your kids are like, I can't even be a human. You can't even live to this, why do you think I could? And I think just, having those, what are those non-negotiables, the inner stuff, the stuff that'll be there when the clothing styles fade and the music genres fade and change.
And that's so true I remember being a little kid, and it was like, every time, I pushed the limits or we did something, my mom would bring it back and be like, what does the Bible say about that? What does Jesus say about that? And as a kid, I was like,
I don't care.
Come on, Mom.
Throw a rock at my head. I don't care what Jesus would have done. But now, like as an adult, that's still ingrained in me as an adult. As a kid, I might have been like, how is this relevant? But now as an adult, I see how it's relevant.
We might have talked about starving children at the dinner table a few times more than other people did, but I had the pictures to prove it.
But, everything came back to Jesus first and foremost. And you did that really well in my whole childhood. We did family devotionals, everything brought back to scripture. No matter how we felt about it emotionally, like emotions were still valued. There was still space for emotion, but it was so much so brought back to, but really, what would Jesus say about this? What does the Bible say about this? And then second was always family. Early on, fighting with my brothers fighting with each other. We'd get into little spats and my mom would say, one day it's just going to be you and your brothers. Your dad and I aren't going to be here. Your friends are going to be gone. You're just going to have your family, and you're shaping that dynamic right now. And that's so true. And now we have, we're strewn all across the country. But we're all really close. Even I'm still kind of putting in the building blocks with my oldest brother, who's 9 years older than me. So that's been a little bit more of a stretch to go from, baby sister and,
now
older brother. Now we're both adults. And so now we're kind of on a level playing field and building that relationship. But that was huge as far as, parenting any children, but it comes back down to, those family values. It was always Jesus first and then your family. Your family is important, and being honest.
I think that's what I was going to say. I think that what happens is, especially if you come like from my perspective of a broken example of parenting, is to be able to get to a place in the Lord, and it doesn't have to be before you have kids. You do this as you go along, for sure. To get to that place where you have enough of a fundamental faith that you can say, these are the truths that aren't going to change. And so, like you said, distill it down to, those few things that you can say, these are the truths. Because then as a parent, it gives that, it gives you that ability to say, I didn't say this. This isn't an arbitrary rule that I made up that, you have to take your shoes off when you come in the house. This is what the Lord said. And this is, thousands of years of a faith in a God who is the creator of everything and has all knowledge and power and wisdom. And so when you lay that out, then there is no arguing.
Yeah.
There isn't a give and take and a back and forth and a wrestling for power. You just say, if you also believe this, 15-year-old child of mine, then let's let that form your decisions. So that it does take some of the pressure off you as a parent, where, you can just say, hey, this is the faith that we shared together. And this is the truth. So let's see what the truth has to say.
And we might disagree on everything else under the sun. And that might change too as we grow. We might disagree on these 3 things, and then 2 of them we end up agreeing on, and there's 3 more things. But through all of that, through toddlering and young adolescents and teens and then adults, the core things stay the same. And you'll always be able to meet in that place. And they'll never change because they're truth that's scriptural, and that's never changing.
Yep, exactly.
And society won't change, and culture won't change it, and your age and your taste in things won't change, your experiences won't change it. Those are the things that never waver. So as much focus and emphasis and attention and intention you can put on those never changing things as the foundation of your relationship with really anyone, right? But I mean, kids in this conversation, daughters, it makes the other stuff, even if there's 1,000 things swirling around that you disagree and butt heads on, it just makes them a different level of stuff. They don't shake your foundation.
Yeah.
That's
And it's that, like, it's that foundation. It's that drip by drip. You can start, if you're a mom of young kids, you start with my kids. It's, we pray at meals. We say a bedtime prayer. Penny came in and prayed over Theo when he had the stomach bug the other day. And it's talking about, biblical truths on a level that's appropriate as they grow older. So, for Penny, it was she skinned her knee. And so we talked about how God made our bodies so that they're, very smart bodies, and they know how to heal because Jesus made us that way. And so we can pray and believe that God made you wonderfully, and that your scraped knee is going to heal. And, you build on that. And then, when you hit those, harder teenage years and adult children, where then my mom could come back to me and say, well, if you believe the Bible, then what does the Bible say about this? Which would have been kind of a riskier thing to say if she hadn't have, started to build that in. And not saying you can't start, if you've got teenagers and you're like, oh, I've
That's
never
right.
done any of
Yeah.
this, you can still, begin to build that.
Yeah, I definitely,
wherever you are, but
yeah, I wanted to add that in. There is no, parenting doesn't end. Yeah. It
That's right.
doesn't ever end. And there is no, moratorium on when you can stop speaking Jesus into your kids' lives.
That's right.
That never, ever ends. And so, you have to come to it in a place of honesty and say, yes, I have this faith in God. Maybe I didn't have it last year or a couple of years ago, and you may see it look like a different, like maybe hypocrisy because I used to do this, but now I do this. But this is my honest place where I am right now. And this is a truth I found right now. And you start where you are.
Yeah.
You just start right where you are, and you start with, God is revealing to me. That's why as Christians, our testimony, which is our story, just a big fancy word for our story, what's happening is important. And we sometimes think that is only for strangers or people in church or other people, but that should start right at your breakfast table.
Yeah.
That should start at your dinner table. That's, when you go to your adult kids' homes and you're sitting at their home, I know one of the things one of my dreams was always going to my kids' house, like when they're grown, and like being invited for dinner. That was just one of my dreams. I really was so looking forward to that. And going in and seeing how do they work saying grace before dinner? How do they work that dynamic, and watching that happen, and, letting go of that and seeing what they do. You never stop that encouragement. You never stop that role of just being that cheerleader and seeing all the things that they're doing that are like, that's successful.
Yeah. Well, and the best, I've learned just even in life, even in any relation, the best form of leadership is following Jesus and letting them watch you. And the best way to teach kids is letting them watch, right? So like if I want to teach my daughter that, we prioritize praying and, what that means to us, she has to see me do it. I could say it all day. And so I think to that point, that never stops either. Your grown children, if you have 30-something-year-old children, they're still watching. And they're still seeing any transformation, and even more so sometimes, because it's like, man, this for 30 some years, I knew this mom this way. And all of a sudden I see this transformation happening and bearing fruit. I mean, that's very impactful, even to your 30 or 40-year-old child. So they're always watching, and therefore you're always teaching, and you always have influence. So it's never too late. Well, I love it. I love what we talked about. One last word from each of you to encourage mamas or daughters listening? Maybe Catherine, you want to give one to mamas and Bethany to daughters, or we always just close with any word of encouragement. Plant in their heart.
I would say, to daughters, just remember that like you are watching your mother grow up, and have some grace for your mother, and just try to get to know her.
That's good advice.
That's the big thing. I mean, it's just that was really eye-opening when I realized, like, did the math. Okay, how old was my mom when she was a mom? Like, because as a young mom, there are moments where I'm like, I still feel like a kid, and realizing that my mom probably felt the same a lot. So just have some grace for your mom.
That's good. How about you?
Definitely say life is too hard to not love with everything that you've got in every situation. I think the best advice anyone ever gave me was, when you're struggling with someone, outlove them. And I don't mean that like a greeting card. I mean the hard work of love, of sacrifice, of sitting and listening to the hard things that are difficult. And because that will buy you the space where you can give your kids wisdom and they'll actually hear it.
Yeah.
Good stuff. I needed this too. I'm like, I'm going to re-listen to this. Well, thank you both for being here. This was cool to have you both here. Perfect timing. And the Lord just, So we love you, all of you listening. And we're just perfect messes covered by grace, just like you. So be encouraged and go love hard, especially the ones that are challenging. And that's a wrap. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of the Couch Conversations. I hope you're inspired and ready to tackle the day knowing you're loved and have a purpose. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'd love it if you left us a rating and a review so more people can join us on this journey. We'll see you next time.